Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
Some context. I, a 24-year-old woman, live in a basement suite with my fiance, who is 26 years old. We live below a man and his young daughter. We're pretty friendly and look out for one another, but aren't exactly close. It's a normal detached home, just divided. We have no windows facing the backyard, just to the left and right of the house. Please note that while we live in the same house, we have had no issues other than hearing what is happening upstairs. I am also an extremely deep sleeper. Behind our backyard is a ravine, basically a tiny creek, but it's incredibly steep on either side, covered in bushes, trees, and other vegetation. It's not exactly easy to walk around in. We have a short, maybe 4-foot tall, chain link fence dividing our property from the creek. One house down there is a little path that leads down the creek and connects to an adjacent field and playground. It's made toned. There are no other paths off of the main one. It is just prickly bushes and steep, tough terrain. So now onto the story. About 3 months ago, my fiance woke me up terrified because she had heard banging outside and there were flashlights shining into our ground level windows. I instantly called 911, who promptly told me the cops were already there and probably the ones with flashlights. Annoyed, I pulled on some pants and headed outside to see what was happening. I was informed by the police the man above me had called because he stated people were on his property harassing him. They asked if we know of any ongoing mental health issues on his side, which makes me question if anything actually happened, but my fiance did hear some weird stuff before the cops showed up. All the while, I'm watching my neighbor plead with the police to check the creek out back because he swears he saw them go out that way. They briefly shine their flashlights back there and leave, determining nothing is actually going on. I get the lowdown the next day. Apparently he heard people banging on his back door, throwing gravel at his windows, and watched his front door handle turn. Man was freaked out, terrified for his daughter, and had no clue who it could be. He spends the next week barely sleeping, sitting by the back door with a baseball bat. Nothing happens, we all relax. It happens again a week later. As soon as he chills out. Same deal, fiance wakes me up, less scared because we know what's going on, but nevertheless the cops find nothing and upstairs man is freaked again. This time he installs cameras. They are on the inside of his house, pointed out the windows. They are rather small and hard to notice, and there's no way you could see them at night. This seems to do the trick. We no longer are dealing with the cops or the begging from whoever is harassing our neighbor. However, after about a month I get chatting in the yard with the neighbor and he tells me almost every single night someone has been in the creek shining a light into his windows. His bedroom specifically. Laser pointers, flashlights, you name it. It's coming from the creek. I'm a little freaked but tell myself he's overly paranoid. Could be some lights from the other side or whatever. This keeps going on. He consistently is complaining about these lights. Concerned someone is still screwy with him. And with being in the same house, last week I said screw it and bought the best outdoor camera I could afford with all the fancy night vision features. Doesn't hurt to have security cameras anyways, right? It should be arriving soon. In the meantime, I'm thinking of some way to keep someone out of the creek. Still slightly doubtful anyone could get back there without hopping our fence. I walk down the path open to public use, stop where the property fence lines start, push past a prickly bush that tries to take me out, and come across a well-worn path with footprints and broken branches, flattened bushes that have clearly been walked on repeatedly. Creeped out, I push on to see where this path goes, and it ends right at our property, right where my neighbor says the lights come from. There is nowhere else to go. The path is right next to where it drops off into the creek. I couldn't go further as it's all thick brush. It just ends at our house. Someone, for weeks, has been sitting in the woods behind our house tormenting my upstairs neighbor for no apparent reason. I am unbelievably creeped out. How do they know what bedroom he's in? How did they know when the cameras went up? Why do they never bother us? He swears up and down he doesn't have any enemies. His ex is the mother of his daughter. They share custody and she wouldn't scare her like that. I'm as baffled as I am horrified. This happened in an empty coffee shop parking lot. I was using their Wi-Fi to download movies. I thought I knew what a narcissist was up until 2 days ago. I studied it, remembered the traits. I thought I knew about 4 of them, including my parents. Trust me, there's a whole nother level of it and it'd be scary to witness if you weren't very secure in yourself, and experiencing it firsthand is a mind game. If you even think a person could not have narcissism, then they probably don't. I was able to extremely clearly detect it in someone to a degree of absolute certainty. I'm glad I had this encounter because what what I had previously thought about certain people was in fact completely wrong judgment. I'm sitting at a coffee shop at 6 in the morning downloading movies on their Wi-Fi. A guy in a truck parks and comes up to my car's slightly open window and asks about the price of the local homes. He's probably about 35 to 40 years old, wearing nice clothes, charming, doesn't stutter or sound stupid. I think this guy is normal, asking a pretty basic question. I'm as passive as I can be. He doesn't seem to want to leave. He's just standing there in an awkward silence after I tell him 320,000 to 500,000. He asks me who's the best builder. I'm thinking, do I look like a realtor? I tell him I don't know. He then says, you have a good long weekend, thanks. Then stuff got pretty weird and it got worse and worse. He goes into the coffee shop for 45 minutes. I'm already thinking to myself that this is somewhat odd. He's probably talking to the teenage employees. There's nobody else in there. He comes out, walks back up to my window and gives me this odd look of disappointment and says, okay, you have a nice long weekend, as if we needed to catch up from his 45-minute absence, like we weren't done talking. He then talks to someone walking by in front of my car. They know each other from years past. The person asking him, so you're back in town. I'm thinking to myself, oh wow, maybe this guy isn't the creepiest guy I've ever met. Guy he used to know leaves. He throws on his Beats headphones, walks to the tailgate of his truck, arms crossed over the back of it, resting his head in his arms, staring at me for at least 5 minutes from about 30 feet away. I glance at him every minute to see if he's still staring at me. I'm like, man, this guy's creepy. I should probably leave, but my movies weren't finished. I'm not one to be afraid of other people, so I stay. I have a combat switchblade in my door for reasons like this. I felt pretty safe because I'm me, but felt like this guy was trying to intimidate me with every lie that came out of his mouth. Inconsistencies galore. He's walking back up to my car. I'm like, what does this guy want now? We talked for 30 minutes. Or well, he did most of the talking. Within 15 minutes, this is what I learned about him without saying more than a few things like, oh, he's looking to buy a house, but he already owns 4. He has a restraining order, can't go within 100 feet of where I suggested he looked for a home. He is on the dangerous persons list, nearly yelling at me to Google it because I'm like, oh okay, whatever, father is rich because he is era, and is a retired cop. I don't believe him, not that I said anything. He reacted to my facial expression alone. He then opens his bank account on his phone and shows me $3,000. He tells me the police pay him $4,500 a month. It says $1,000 a month. I tell him it looks like they shorted you for the past 3 payments. He quickly takes the phone away, looks insulted. He says, you see that? Canadian Provincial Police. It also stands for Canadian Pension Plan, which this guy is clearly too unstable to hold a job of any kind whatsoever. He claims he was in secret operations with police, can't say what he did at all. Tells me he was with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and what kind of training they gave him at age 18, solitude in a box for 8 weeks, using the bathroom in a cup, is the main enforcer for the local notorious biker gang. Is spouting off random names like I'm supposed to know them, like I care to begin with, informs me that people are afraid of him. He then asks if I'm afraid of him. This gave me a good laugh. He looked at me like he was totally insulted. People then arrived to get coffee. He states looks like the cowards are coming out of the woodwork. He then informs me that he's watching out for police, states that he is untouchable, the biker gangs have his back, then says so do the police because they don't care, which I'm not sure how that makes sense. I decided to ask if he has a family, hinting that maybe he should go be with them instead of pestering me. He apparently has 4 kids who are each hockey champions under age 16. They were trained by none other than the Toronto Maple Leafs coach. He made sure to whip his phone out to prove this, that in his contacts is someone named Blue. He makes it crystal clear who the people are. To make sure I understand, I let him talk and talk until I say, well, I don't follow hockey. He realizes he's just wasted his valuable time, like 5 minutes straight explaining who the 3 hockey coaches were in order of skill, and he's pretty disappointed that I don't follow hockey. He asks me what I do. I tell him some lies saying I'm a transcriber, make $15 per hour, company name is Lion Bridge to hint that I know he's completely full of it. He types this company name into his phone saying that's good information to have, like even though he's rich and everything he needs to make $15 an hour. He asks me if I know where the best houses are in a suburb of extremely similar looking $500,000 houses. I ask if he has a realtor. He says no, I don't need one. I humor him, you want to pay in cash, don't you? Apparently everything he does is off the books, except like, you know, the pension plan of $1,000 per month. He then starts talking about a black guy violating a young girl. This is so random, I don't know what to say. I become quiet. Palms are sweaty. I'm thinking to myself something like psychopath alert. I can't even use my phone, my fingers are so wet. I'm just vaping away, blowing vapor out the window at him. He's not taking the hint. The senior aged man walks past him towards a dumpster. He says to his face, look at this chump. The old man is wide-eyed like he doesn't know what is happening, and neither do I. Old man looks at me and gives me this look of confirmation that he has completely sized up the situation that I'm in and is also thinking what is going on. The guy that informs me that he owns the town starts spouting random names again, then informs me there's a serial killer living down the street. Tells me he isn't leaving until 7:30 in the morning to not be rude to me. I'm so confused by this I just stop talking. A silent minute passes. He tells me I should leave because it's going to get loud soon. I'm now considering that this guy is here to shoot or bomb someone, possibly me. I grab my blade but leave it closed and soaking in my left hand. I ask why should I leave? He says there's a storm coming. I tell him I'm not afraid of thunder. He looks insulted. He's been speaking in covert wording this entire time, so to get a better feel for this guy I ask where he's from and if he slept in his truck last night. He looks offended like I'm the one who is off his rocker, but he doesn't say anything other than no. Another silent minute passes. He then looks at me, changes his facial expression to angry, says very calmly that if he were me he'd get out of town right now. Is he warning me or threatening me? I honestly can't tell. It takes me a few seconds to even process what he's just said. I'm not intimidated in the least, or amused. I humor him, why's that? He starts laughing his head off, walking away now and asks was that scary? I laugh and tell him an assured no, shaking my head at the absurdity of him. He's now halfway to his truck. Finally, now he's walking back to me. I flick my blade open and casually flip it in the air to inverted blade down. He fist bumps me and says you're a good guy, laughing, then walks away. He roars away in his truck, windows down, music blaring at 7:30 in the morning. I was just glad that he was gone. I just sat there perplexed at this character, wondering how many mental disorder boxes he'd check off. It wasn't even a question. This guy was trying to intimidate me in any way possible and was trying to prove his worth to me in any way possible, reacting to each of my facial expressions so quickly and in such a way that made me feel like he was sizing me up the entire time. Just glad he eventually left. I'm on holiday with my boyfriend and our dog in the Lake District. We had been for a meal and was on the way back to the Airbnb. I had had a parcel strategically delivered to a supermarket, so I went in first. Then my boyfriend went in to buy beer and some groceries whilst I waited outside with the dog. It was dark, and as it's off season, there weren't many people around. About 5 minutes into waiting on the pavement, an early 40-year-old man wearing a red shell suit type ensemble walked past. I accidentally caught eye contact, so smiled weakly, and he leered creepily back as he passed. I watched him walk away, and as he got to the end of the shop he started screaming victims. Victims. Everyone's a victim. About 10 to 20 seconds after that he started singing Take Me Down to the Paradise City where the grass is green and the girls are pretty. He went round the corner and I thought it was safe. My boyfriend was taking too long at this point, so I tried to get his attention through the glass door. I then see the same guy coming back up the road heading straight towards me. I really didn't want to have another run-in with this guy, so I went into the supermarket, completely ignoring the no dogs allowed rule, and made an animated display so that both he and the cashier knew I was there. When my boyfriend came out, I explained what had happened and pointed out the guy who was staggering uphill the direction we needed to go. I suggested we hang back and kept our distance. He turned off down a side road, and that was the last we saw of him. For the entire walk back, I was turning around to make sure we weren't being followed. Even now, as we're sat watching Die Hard, I'm really creeped out. I know I was probably in no danger, but it's a really weird thing to shout at a lone woman with a little dog. If you're liking this video, all I ask is that you make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you. This happened around 2018, right after my sister moved out of our apartment together. It's been bothering me since I just moved out. I was home alone on my day off when someone knocked on my door. No one ever visits and I have anxiety, so that was terrifying to my brain already. I answered and it was a woman who lived in one of the basement apartments. She seemed nice at first, asking if I wanted any clothes she was giving away because they were her style but supposedly matched mine perfectly as a young woman. That was already a red flag in my mind because the only time I ever saw her was when I was walking to work, wearing my uniform of a black shirt, black pants, and black hat. But I let her talk because I'm super awkward and hated being rude to technical strangers. Then she started getting pushy and listing off super expensive name brands to try to get me to go to her apartment, which is an old small building, no cameras, and I lived on the top floor, which would be down what I call the creepy stairs and next to the door to the back lot no one used. Then I realized she was holding a notebook open with a script of what to say. I continued to project, but my anxiety wouldn't let me close the door on her face without fear of her lashing out. She kept insisting until I finally told her my boyfriend was going to be home soon and suggested she donated them. My boyfriend wasn't going to be home for many hours, but she didn't need to know that obviously. She leaves and I go back to my room, which has a window facing walking that back lot/alley. A few moments later, I hear a fight happening in the lot and see her with the previous. He was already fired at that point, maintenance man. It's a loud, screaming fight, and they're standing next to his truck, which has tinted windows and a covered truck bed. My paranoia went a little wild, so I texted my family about it to feel a bit safer. Then I believe he left, but a little while later, something hits my door hard. I didn't check, just stared. Then it happened again and again, all night until my boyfriend came home, and for a few days when I was alone. I found out after looking at the door that they were hitting my deadbolt, and it was off center. Even after it was replaced, the damage couldn't be fixed. It stopped after a little while, and the woman moved out almost immediately after all of that. I don't want to feed my paranoia, but something obviously wasn't right. I know I should have called the police, but police in my town are relatively useless. Also, that maintenance man was rehired and was the one who replaced my deadbolt, insisting he kept the extra key despite never needing the old. My new house is much safer, thankfully. This is a creepy encounter that started a couple months ago and stretches to now. I live in a condo building that shares a courtyard with a sister building. One evening just before sunset, I was sitting on a bench in the courtyard that has a view into my low-level apartment, listening to music and playing Sudoku on my phone. A man walking his dog approached me. He appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s. I am a woman in my middle 20s, but did not find it that odd because his dog seemed interested in me. Without taking out my earbuds, I pet his dog, but then after a quick pet, the man was still hovering. I took out my earbuds, giving him a look of what's up. He nodded at my open purse that was beside me, which had a pack of cigarettes in it. Side note, I rarely smoke, they were in my purse left over from a bachelorette party. He asked for a cigarette, and I gave him one. He took that as an invitation to sit down next to me to smoke it. He started up small talk, asking if I lived there, how long I've lived there, stuff like that. After he finished the cigarette, I expected him to leave, but he stayed. I did not have any interest in spending my evening chatting with this guy, but I did not feel unsafe. Other people were walking their dogs and we were in view of many condo windows. I figured he was a lowly older man and it would be an easy kind deed to sit and chat with him on my Tuesday night. It got a little weird when he asked me if I'd like to come up to his apartment to try some fancy wine. He told me about how he's very into wine and a cigarette on his balcony. I told him I couldn't that night. He then asked me to text him as a way to exchange numbers because he didn't have his phone and that we could do it another time. I obliged to avoid the awkwardness of saying no. By now, it had been over an hour, it had gotten dark, and no one else was in the courtyards. He said it was nice talking. He looked forward to showing me the fancy wines, said he'd let me go enjoy the rest of my night, and he left. Shortly after, he texted me asking to plan for that Thursday night. I still assumed it was innocent and he was just lonely because the age difference. None of the conversation was flirty, and frankly I am a lot better looking than him age aside. That said, I didn't want to, so I strategically told him maybe due to tentative plans. This avoided the suggestion of an alternative date and gave me the easy opportunity to cancel. I shrugged it off as an interesting encounter and texted my friends about it. They all immediately told me it was very creepy and to cancel and not text him again. While I did not intend to go over there or text him again, I thought they were overreacting. Then I thought more about our innocent conversation and all the personal information he got out of me. He now knows which of the two buildings I live in. I didn't tell him which unit, but he could figure it out based on what he does know. The floor I live on, my unit faces the courtyard. My unit does not have a balcony, it's a rental, not an own unit. The month I moved in, and my cat likes to watch the courtyard from the window. He also now knows I live alone, my age, where I work, my past few employers, the suburb I grew up in, where I went to school, both high school and college, where my parents live, and my phone number. I didn't think I was stupid, but now I'm surprised I didn't give this guy my social security number. That said, he got this information out of me because he also shared all these details about himself. That, along with him living in the sister building, not mine, made me feel better. But then I remembered the sister building's fobs work to access each other. I also then remember he told me multiple times he does not carry his phone or wallet on him while he walks his dog at night because of all the muggings. When he kept bringing this up, I found it very odd because we live in one of the safest neighborhoods of the city, but shrugged it off. I now am scared he may have bad intentions and wanted to persuade me into putting myself in a vulnerable position without my phone. I tried reverse searching his number and nothing came up. I was smart enough to read his last name from his dog's collar, and I googled it with the first name he gave me. But even with all the other information he gave me, like his job and education, I could not find him online. This left me a little unnerved, but his response to me canceling was just to text him another time when I am available. I felt better about it until the next next Tuesday evening, exactly 1 week down to the hour of us originally meeting. I looked out my window and saw him sitting on the exact bench we were on, one of like 20, staring up at my building. He wasn't even with his dog or smoking, just sitting there looking up at my building. I immediately dropped to the floor and peeped only my head to take another look out the window, which starts a couple feet above the floor, but stretches the whole wall horizontally. It was definitely him, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. I still excused it as maybe innocent, maybe he hoped to run it to me again and was just waiting, not spying. But in the weeks following, I saw him on that bench multiple more times. I've been avoiding the courtyard and keeping my blinds closed, but they can't be closed 24/7. Apart from me, both my cat and plants need the natural light. A couple weeks ago, my blinds were open, and I had to pass the window naked to retrieve a towel. As I passed, I looked out the window. Not only was he on that bench, without his dog or a cigarette, looking up at my building, he was looking straight at my unit and my window at me. I again dropped to the floor. I grabbed the blanket next to me, wrapped myself in it, and stood back up. He was still staring. We held eye contact and he did not look away. Eventually, I closed the blinds, but he knew I knew and he was not shy about it. A few days after that, I saw him in my building lobby. I ignored him and he ignored me, and I quickly got into the elevator. I then left for a 2-week vacation. I got back a few days ago and haven't seen him. I'm hoping the time gap bored him. In the early 2000s, I was skateboarding outside of my old elementary school with a close friend. We were 12 or 13 at the time, and skateboarding can be a draw for police, and we were well aware of that. Being harassed by a running from cops was nearly a weekly occurrence for us around that time. After we had been there maybe 20 minutes, a new-looking unmarked Ford Ranger or maybe Mazda equivalent drove by, slowed down, and turned into the parking lot after noticing us. He got out and asserted he was a police officer and that we could get in a lot of trouble. He was wearing plain clothes, white, and probably in his 30s or 40s. He approached me, patted me down, obviously noticed something in my cargo pocket. It was a weed pipe. I was scared that I was going to get busted and I froze. He ignored the item in my pocket, along with whatever else was in there. I don't remember if the touches were weird in nature or focused on any one area of my body. He didn't bother searching my friend. He didn't ask any questions that I remember other than whether or not our parents knew we were there. I don't remember what we answered. Knowing us and our parents, they probably did have at least a vague idea of what we were up to. It is likely we said yes, but I seem to remember telling him no. He began to conclude the interaction and said something like be safe or you should probably go home now. Anyway, he got back in his truck. I remember seeing the cab after he opened the door and it looking like a mess inside. There was trash and signs that he was not driving an official vehicle of any capacity. I do remember thinking that was odd at the time. He left. We went on our merry way after I landed that kickflip down the 3-stair or whatever trick I was working on that day. The situation felt a little odd, but I didn't tell my parents. I was a teenager with more angst than most, after all. Plus, bringing it up would have surely invoked some lecture or accusation regarding drug use, and I was not about to bring that upon myself. Years later, my friend brought it up. He said he had mentioned it to his dad recently. His dad was a police officer at the time of the incident. His dad got upset and was dumbfounded by the fact that neither one of us told anyone about it. Now that I'm knocking some of this loose, I think my buddy actually told the guy his dad was a cop, and that is when he began disengaging. That was the day I realized that if I had been alone, things could have gone much, much worse. It was over 20 years ago, but I still wonder if I should report it in case it could lead to some sort of resolution for someone who was not as fortunate as we were. This happened about a week ago, so I had biked to school with my best friend. We were going to stay after school to work on a project together anyway, so it worked out. On our bike ride home from school, we decided not to go straight home and that we wanted to go on a small bike ride down a path by the park that will lead us back to my house anyways. When we were unchaining our bikes from the bike racks, I noticed like a red Dodge Dakota across from the school. Just for your information, we live in a pretty small town, so most of the kids who get picked up, we know of what cars they get into and what cars hang around the school at pickup time, as well as what cars the teachers and students own that drive themselves to school, or at least somewhat of an idea, but I usually didn't see that one, and it was probably like an hour and a half past the time school got out, but it could have been someone's relative picking them up or whatever, so I really didn't think much of that. We started biking towards our path, and after about 5 minutes my friend told me the red truck was driving on the road next to the sidewalk we were biking on, but it was a little behind us. I told her that it's probably fine and a coincidence and that they are probably going home or live around here, so we kept going. But he didn't stop. After about 10 more minutes of him still following us, then I started getting a little concerned. We ended up continuing until we got to a gas station because then at least there would be people around and less of a chance of something happening. So we parked our bikes and went in. We grabbed drinks and a snack to not make it look odd that we were in there, but while we were in there I called my brother to come get us and that there was someone following us. He told us he would be right there and to just stay inside. So we did. We paid for our snacks and told the cashier about it, and she let us just sit there until my brother came. My brother pulled in, and so we walked out to get our bikes, but we couldn't find them. We looked around and saw the red truck pulled behind the gas station with our bikes right next to it. The man that was driving it was looking right at us. We went and told my brother. He said forget about the bikes and get in the car. So we did. My brother got out of the car and went into the gas station to get the employee, and while he was doing that, the man sped off out the back parking lot of the gas station. When my brother came out, he said that the gas station worker was going to check back the cameras and see if she can get a license plate to give to the police, and that my brother gave her our mom's information for any updates. We both made it home safe. I'll keep y'all updated when we find out more. I'm not sure how creepy this actually is, but I always try and play it safe. I don't believe in taking chances, and I don't intend on becoming another statistic. If that means playing on the side of caution, then so be it. I'm a bartender by trade. I've been working in bars since I was 21. I'm 29 currently and female, so I've had to pick a thing or two up. I get a fair amount of unwanted attention in my day-to-day life. I'd say about as much as the average woman gets. I'm not a vain person, but I do put a lot of attention into my wardrobe, my makeup, and my nails. I know it's such a sideways way of thinking, but most of my money is made on tips, and I have to make myself presentable enough. But because of this, I do set my boundaries very strongly. This doesn't mean that I'm perfect though. I'm still a person with people urges. It was a typical Saturday night. The bar that I currently work at, and the one I've been working at for the past 2 years, is a pretty small bar with more of an emphasis on the quality of the drinks and the relaxed atmosphere. I don't serve as many Vegas bombs or Bud Lights that I have at previous bars that I've worked at. It's mostly cocktails and craft beers. This usually keeps the rowdy crowd out. On Saturdays we do trivia night, which I occasionally get tasked with hosting. It's not my favorite thing to do, but something I have to do as per my job description. There was a girl in the crowd that was answering most of the questions I sent out. She wasn't alone and came in with a group of people, all seemingly in their middle 20s. Her and I ended up talking for a while at the bar in between serving drinks. She was flirty, which isn't something I'm incredibly good at, but she was sweet. And just to make it clear, I have an equal preference in men and women. I wasn't trying to lead her on or humor her for the sake of making tips. In the crowd of trivia participants came this one guy. I wasn't the one to identify him, so I couldn't tell you his name. He began making rude remarks from one bar stool down from where this girl was sitting. He was somewhere in his 30s. It seemed like he was hitting on her, but she didn't seem very responsive. I told him that she didn't seem interested and then he should stop. He apologized with a very sinister looking smile and looked down at my chest, claiming he was looking for a name tag to formally address me. We don't have name tags. I told him that if he continued making people uncomfortable, he would be removed. One thing I took notice of that made me sufficiently uncomfortable was the fact that he kept one hand in a jacket pocket, just the one, and he seemed to be fiddling with something. I don't play around with this kind of stuff, so I told security about it. While I was walking back, I overheard him telling another bar patron that I basically told him I would sleep with him when I got off of shift. The girl from the bar, as well as the random bar goer, told him that his behavior was out of line. I told him that he needed to leave and that security was going to kick him out. His response changed from sinisterly playful to outright agitated. He made a comment about my sexuality and told the random bar guy he was sitting near that he was a homophobic slur. I hate guys like this with a passion. People who want to disrupt the comfort of others in some half-hearted attempt at getting laid. I walked from behind the bar and told him to leave and tried again to flag security. He made a very crude comment about me letting him do some stuff to me, and in return I wouldn't feel the need to be attracted to women unless it was a, let's just say, group effort. The girl that I had been talking to threw a glass of scotch in his face, then headbutted him in the mouth. Security finally came running, only to try and kick her out. I flew into a rage over that and told him that the girl was good and she was only doing the job that he was supposed to be doing. He was removed from the bar. I kept an eye on him through the window. He stuck around near the bar for a bit, but after an hour or so he left. The girl offered to stay with me until closing, which wasn't necessary. I'd closed the place down so many times at 2 to 3 in the morning, but I gave her the "oh, would you please" brutality. I also give credit where it's due, so I gave the other guy from the bar a good thank you hug before he left and told him that he made me feel safer. The girl told him the same, and I told the manager and the owner that we had an issue with the customer. Bar camera footage was pulled and his identity was confirmed. He had an issue with getting banned from bars and had a tendency to start fights while intoxicated. I hate to say it, but I'm still keeping an eye out for him. Not sure if this is creepy enough, but it was for me. My girlfriend and I were graduate students living together in a 6-unit apartment building with an outside stairwell. It was an older Victorian home that had been converted into apartments. The whole street was lined with similar buildings. It was off campus but conveniently located within walking distance of bars, a coffee shop, and several restaurants. The neighborhood had a laid-back, bohemian vibe. The tenants were a mixture of college kids, young professionals, and families. The area was generally safe, but it wasn't too far from a rougher section of town. It was a Thursday night, and being the night owl that I am, it was past 3 in the morning. I had just finished a movie. I turned the television off and went to the stairwell for a quick smoke before bed. We were in the middle of a snowstorm, and the ground was covered in 6 inches of fresh powder, and it was freezing scary cold. I quickly smoked my cigarette and rushed back inside. My girlfriend was always complaining about me forgetting to lock the door, and as was my habit, I left the door unlocked. I jumped into bed, and just as I was falling asleep, I thought I heard a noise. I brushed it off at first, but then I heard a creak, probably just the wind, I concluded. Moments later, I heard the floorboards creaking. Now I was listening intently. My girlfriend felt me shuffling and asked what was wrong. I told her I thought I heard something. Then we both heard what sounded like someone stumbling into our couch. We shot up, and I yelled, "Is someone there?" No answer. The floor creaked again. This time, in unison, we shouted, "Who's there?" Another noise. I quietly stood up and scanned the room for something that could be used as a weapon. Nothing. Growing up, my dad always kept a baseball bat under his bed, and I regretted not adopting this practice. We yelled again, but there was no response. Again, but this time, from the darkness, we were greeted by a low-pitched, incomprehensible growl. I wondered if one of my buddies was playing a prank on me. That seemed out of character for my friends, especially at this hour on a weekday night, and during a snowstorm. What I really thought was that a crackhead had wandered in. My girlfriend yelled, "Who's out there?" More footsteps. The intruder was still in the family room, but he was getting closer to our bedroom. We heard the growl again, but this time it was followed by a gurgle, and it's Matt. We didn't know anybody named Matt, at least not any that would enter our apartment uninvited in the middle of the night. I looked at my girlfriend. I'd never seen someone so scared. If worst came to worst, I thought to myself, I know I can outrun this person. I hoped it didn't come to that. Matt who? We shouted repeatedly. After a long pause, he finally said, "Matt, I'm friends with Mike and Kelly." Relief washed over both of us. Mike and Kelly were our neighbors. I turned on the lights and walked into the family room. There he stood, a 6'2", slovenly looking college kid. Matt was blacked out drunk. Our neighbors had hosted a pre-game party at their apartment, followed by a trip to the nearby bars. They had abandoned Matt, and despite the storm, he had found his way back to their apartment. Their door was locked, and his phone calls had gone unanswered. His evolutionary drive to survive had kicked in, and he had sought warmth in the first unlocked apartment he could find. I told him that he scared us and that he had to go. He stepped outside, and I quickly locked the door behind him. The next day, I learned that Matt froze to death. He'd been discovered by another neighbor, huddled next to her car under the lean-to garage. I'm just kidding. I have no idea what happened to Matt. I do, however, remember being a little concerned for him after my nerves settled. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.